It doesn't mean that they were necessarily aliens, but somebody from a previous civilization or possibly an alien race definitely appears to have modified human culture at multiple touch points. If you look at Peru, there's Viracocha. So they have somebody who came from what we think appears to be India, and he didn't match their physical appearance at all. He had lighter skin and I want to say red hair. And he also brought books. And what's really troubling is the Peruvians don't use books. So how did they know what a book was? And why would they ascribe that to a God bringing knowledge?
The Codega is a guide and a storyteller, escorting you through the night, lighting the way, warding off thieves, ghosts, demons, and other oddities. Along the journey, his companions would often share with him the most curious of stories that he'd record in his Codex. Perhaps you just might find yourself traveling with the Codega and sharing one of yours. Welcome back, wanderers of the weird and seekers of the hidden. I'm your guide, as usual, Rye the Codega, lighting the lantern and leading you through the shadowy corridors of lost history, hidden knowledge, and all things strange that echo from our distant past, from our distant future, and everything in between. Now, today, we're going to be diving into the realm where fact and fiction blur, but not in the way you'd expect. My guest is Chris Fox, an author who doesn't just write speculative fiction. He writes what he believes really happened or is happening or has happened. Now, through his fast-paced novels and meticulous research, Chris brings to life ancient civilizations, forgotten tech, and world-shaping events that official history either glosses over or just deliberately buries. From ancient cataclysms and lost super civilizations, which we've touched on many times already, so this is going to be fantastic. I'm looking forward to this, to the breadcrumbs left behind in mythology and stone. Now, Chris isn't just spinning yarns, he's decoding the past, one epic saga at a time. So I want you guys to buckle up because this episode might just rewrite what you thought you knew about our ancient origins. And before we get there, though, everybody, welcome again back to Codex of Curiosities. Again, thank you for supporting the show. And if you're looking in ways to support the show, it's just as simple as share. Click to share this. I appreciate that wholeheartedly. Now, if you want to financially support the show, I would really appreciate that. We have a Patreon where you will get all the audio episodes unaltered, no commercials, because commercials suck. And finally, we also have the merch store. So if you guys want to support the show, go buy some merch. I got some cool stuff, if you're into Bigfoot, if you're into aliens, UFOs, targeted individuals, you name it, I got it. Go check it out. All right, enough of me talking. Let's bring Chris to the stage. Chris, welcome to Codega's Codex of Curiosities.
Hey, thanks for having me. I love the show, and I might have to stop by the merch store and get one of those hats.
Awesome. Yes. I'm always sporting the merch. It's like, yeah, I got hats, I got T-shirts, I got sweaters, and whatever else I feel. It's like, okay, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, but right now it's just stickers, hats, and shirts. But Chris, welcome. I'm really looking forward to this. Your books are fascinating. The artwork on them, like we talked about before the show, it's just standalone. It's just amazing. So before we go too far into that or into anything else, why don't you tell our listeners and viewers just a little bit about yourself and where they can find you?
Sure. So I can be found at chrisfoxwrites.com. I am an internationally best-selling science fiction and fantasy author. That's been my only job for, 10 years now. Once upon a time, I was a software engineer, worked with the early iPhone, got into it right when it first started, and that was really, really good timing. And that sort of introduced me to Amazon and Audible when they were getting big. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm an author. I could do this. So I put out my very first book in 2014, No Such Thing as Werewolves, which is about all the stuff we're going to talk about today, about vanished civilizations. Spoilers, there are werewolves. I took a lot of liberties with it, and my basic idea was, what if all the myths were true? So I started writing series like that, and I've been doing it ever since. I follow archaeology and anthropology very closely. They are my lifeblood and have been since, the 80s maybe.
Okay, I'm loving this. It's like, and I agree with you. Like, what if these, like, we have all these myths, and it's like, where did they come from? There has to be, in my opinion, there has to be truth with them. Maybe some of them, it's only maybe like a sliver of truth, but some of them, who knows? They might be completely 99% truth. So, where do we go from here? Where, so you jumped into, what was it, the werewolf one again? What
No
was the
such
name
thing
of
as
that?
werewolves. It's called the
No such
Deathless
thing as
Saga is the name of
werewolves.
the series. Mhm.
Okay, so let's just go into there, and I don't know. You lead the charge, because I'm going to sit here and listen, because I am fascinated already.
Sure. So the story behind this book, for those that don't know, when Gobekli Tepe first hit the scene, that was huge in the world because up until that point, we were told that Stonehenge was the oldest piece of stone in the world. No one believed that any ruins were older than that. It was impossible. We were taught that all of our modern civilization existed in the last 5,000 years. And that didn't sit right with me because as a species, we've been anatomically identical for 300,000 years at least. So for 295,000 years, we thought the coolest thing ever was rocks. And just 5,000 years ago, we're like, how about we start inventing stuff and we make the internet and nuclear missiles and all the other stuff that we've created and start going to other planets? We've done all that in 5,000 years. Well, why didn't we do that before? So I started realizing, well, the world's climate was very different. I mean, maybe our people were locked in an ice age, right? We have climatological charts. So I started looking at these charts and I realized there are two massive interglacials that were warmer than our current time period. So if you go back in these times, it would be warmer than it is today, and it would be the perfect environment for humanity to thrive. And the first of those was only 150,000 years ago. So we were anatomically identical. So I thought that we have to have done something during that time period. And I did a lot of comparative religion where I never really went to college. I took a few classes, but like I would just read the Bible, read the Quran, read the Vedas. And I started reading the Vedas and it's like, wait, their history goes back 400,000 years. Like it follows all the stuff that I believe and they talk about all of it. So they actually have colonies that correspond, we believe, to the Mayan pre-culture. So the Vedas talk about this. They don't call them the Mayans, but they discuss their locations of where they are and that they're on a different continent. And I'm like, sure, this is religion, but man, that seems awfully odd. So I started comparing other religions and the Epic of Gilgamesh, Zoroastrianism, all the Abrahamic religions, they all talk about a flood. And they all have different figures that are the same person. So you've got Noah or Yima, or it depends on what religion you're in, but somebody was asked to be the survivor. Now, God, and I put that in air quotes for people who are listening and not watching, um, is different in each of these, but it's ultimately somebody who was very powerful and knew a calamity was coming. And Randall Carlson has done a lot of work on that. He studied it very closely. He's got a great, like, 2 hour video. It's about Halloween, of all things. But what it teaches us is that Halloween has a common starting point. And every culture in the world, or most of them, seem to celebrate Halloween right around the same time. That shouldn't be possible because we literally have different calendars. So how could that be? I mean, these things would drive me nuts. I spent years like laying awake wondering about it. Well, how it's possible is the torrid meteor shower comes between October 31st and November 2nd every periodic number of years. So what Randall Carlson believes is that we are in a cosmic shooting gallery and periodically our planet gets nailed by an asteroid and that resets our civilization, and that we as a species kind of remember this. So we've lost most of our memories, but we have enough mythology to harken back to this original cataclysm. And what's interesting is if you look at the oldest word in humanity, the very oldest word, the first one that we have, it's ashes. That's so weird to me. So why is that the oldest word and why has that been preserved? So I really genuinely believe that human civilization has restarted probably multiple times. And everything we found from the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, which are a real thing at the Temple of Edfu in Egypt, where he talks about the time Zep Tepi and a culture that predated him and somebody before him giving him the knowledge that he was going to steward and give to humanity so that this time when we had the calamity, we didn't reset nearly as hard. We'd have an advantage we didn't have before. And sure enough, shortly thereafter, that's when the flood hit. We know for now we can see evidence all over the world, meltwater pulse 1A, meltwater pulse 1B. We know for a fact there was a flood. We know that sea levels were 300 feet lower than they are today, so that the coast would have been radically different. So that took me to my next thing. Now I start looking at the coastlines everywhere. And of course, we find ruins everywhere, not just the Bimini Road, but near Cuba. There's an underwater temple. There's images of this underwater temple, and they've never excavated it, but we've had them for 20 years. There are pyramids in Antarctica. There are pyramids in China. There are pyramids in the Andes. There are pyramids everywhere. And of course, in that Cuban temple, there are pyramids. So I believe we had a unified global culture, and probably there were several different nations based on the historical fragments that we've inherited. So if you look at, for example, what Plato had to say about Atlantis, Plato talks at length about Atlantis, and what he says is Poseidon went there and married their queen. And they had 10 kids together, and there were 10 kingdoms of Atlantis. So the reason why we can't pinpoint the location of Atlantis is there's lots of them. There is actual
That's what I've been saying. It's like saying, oh, the Roman Empire. Well, it's not just Rome. It would be so much more. It would be branched out so much more. Yeah.
So I have a series that's actually launching this week. It's called Heir to Atlantis, and it takes all of this scientific knowledge that we have about the Eye of the Sahara and why we think that is the site of Atlantis, and I kind of took it and ran with it. And I looked at there's somebody named I want to say Edward Sitchin, Josiah Sitchin. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he's the one
Stitchin,
who
yes. Edward Stitchin, I believe it is. Yes. Yeah.
great. He's the one who originally theorized that there would be a vault under the Sphinx's paws. He had a vision. So I worked that into, I was like, okay, we know that stuff exists that predates humanity. We found a woodworking that's over 500,000 years old. So theoretically, all of this stuff had to be tied together with a technology probably that we don't understand fully. And I thought, what if you can encode memory? And the reason why so many people have visions is they're encountering one of these ancient memories that are stored. So you see a vision of the past, and you're like, that's why I believe there's a vault under the Sphinx's paws. And granted, not all of this, is borne out. I can't prove a lot of it, but what I really take pride on in my novels is you can't disprove it either. I
There
try
we
to use as
go.
much science as possible and everything up to date.
Uh, I'm loving where this is going already. You're very well versed with this all, which is fantastic. It's not just like, yeah, I think this is it. I think this is it. This is fantastic. Have you ever talked to Michael Laflemme as well? He has written a book. Oh, of course, I can't remember off the top of my head about Atlantis itself.
I have
Oh,
not. I know who he is.
here
I
we
don't know
go.
if he knows who I am.
Okay, so Visions
Yep.
of Atlantis.
I recognize that
Yeah,
cover.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, he'll be coming back on my show again very soon. So he might be
Mhm.
someone to have a good conversation with as well. But sorry, Chris, keep. I don't want to steal the thunder on this one. Keep going. This is
Oh,
I
sure. So
love where this is going.
continuing on the Atlantis train and kind of what my current series is about, I looked at every single ruin in the world, like Ganon Padang, that I think is a pyramid, and I'm kind of working them all into the series. So every book we go to a real world site and examine it, and I give all the evidence that we actually have, and then what I think is actually there. And granted, I'm taking some liberties. I don't know for certain that this ancient culture that I believe existed had any technology we didn't have, but man, we got some really big questions no one can answer. So if you're familiar with Dr. Robert Schoch's work on the Sphinx, he is a
I am
renowned.
not actually.
Oh, you're gonna love this. He's a renowned geologist from
Okay,
Boston University,
okay,
and he has tenure.
okay. I actually do. Sorry, I didn't know the name, but I know of the geologist. But yes, please
Oh
continue.
yeah, yeah. Everybody in our space knows this guy, even if you don't know his name or have read any of his books. He has two books on the subject that are awesome. And the long and short of it is there are thousands of years of water erosion in the Sphinx enclosure and on the Sphinx itself that don't appear on all the temples and pyramids around them. They're only on the Sphinx. We know how the pyramids were built roughly. We know when they were built and we know who built them. So it started with this dude named Imhotep. He was the equivalent of Einstein back in very early dynastic Egypt. He made something called a mastaba, and then he stacked another one on top of it and made the first step pyramid. So, like, I don't have a lot of question about the pyramids, except maybe they were rebuilt and not built. But we know for sure that that happened and kind of when it was 75 years of Egyptian works, and they documented the food they fed their workers and where they got the stone. But they don't say anything about Sphinx. Nothing. The first person to mention the Sphinx is Khafre, that's Khufu's son. He was the second pharaoh who'd made a great pyramid, and he honored the Sphinx but he didn't claim credit for it. So you've got this info from Dr. Robert Schoch that says the Sphinx could be as old as 50,000 years old. And there's no way to prove it. The only way that water erosion could have happened was when it was a wetter climate. And we know that 7,000 years ago, it was, in fact, a much, much wetter climate. This is not debated. Even in mainstream academia, there is a massive river that bisects Africa that is wider than the Amazon. And it would have really enabled the civilization. And right in the heart of that river is the Eye of the Sierra. It's called the Recot structure, for those that are unfamiliar. And this is a series of rings in a geologic structure of an old volcano that perfectly matches Plato's description of Atlantis, just so happens to be in a riverbed and flows out to the Atlantic Ocean. So it would have been the perfect place for a trade empire. And for those who've read Plato's work, a lot of stuff gets mistranslated. It is not the island of Atlantis. He called it a Nessos. And what that means is a spit of land that is covered by water on at least three sides. It doesn't have to be an island. And it definitely doesn't have to be in the middle of the ocean. So really, I think that a lot of people got it wrong. In the last few years, kind of our community has figured out this is probably the most likely spot of Atlantis. The trouble is that people know 5 or 6 other spots. Well, 5 or 6 other spots would be the other kingdoms of Atlantis. There were 10 kids. Each kid led his own kingdom. The eldest son, his name was Atlas. You've probably heard of it. There's the Atlas Mountains right there. Atlantis and Atlas are the same root word. And each of the other 4 sons, the first 4 sons, we have found real world cities that correspond to them. So we don't know how old they are, just that they've been built on for 10 plus thousand years. And we don't know who originally settled them, but it just so happens that their names are the same. Gadiros is one of them. It's in Spain. Today it's a modern day city of Cadiz, which factors heavily in the first novel. Our protagonist Mitch is an influencer. He's a little bit autistic. He believes he knows where Atlantis is, and I have him following the breadcrumbs to find it. And the breadcrumbs are all real. It's all stuff from the real world that I've never heard any mainstream academic, and I debate them all the time, never heard anybody be able to refute.
Wow. Okay, I need to read your books, because these I love how you're kind of like intertwining them together. This is kind of like it seems like it's a real world almost Indiana Jones kind of style thing, or maybe like a oh along that line. I like that it's like this Tomb Raider kind of that you're giving me, these vibes that you're giving me, and it's really interesting, but it's all real. And so you're intertwining these two worlds, which I think is a very smart thing to do, because you're bringing
Mm-hmm.
these
I
readers along
Go
that
ahead.
maybe who never go along with this, and you're introducing them to this world, the real world.
Mm-hmm. I tried this in 2014 with my first series with that No Such Thing as Werewolves. I wanted to do the same thing, but it was my very first novel. I was just learning to write, and I didn't know as much about archaeology. So this is like the perfected version. And that first series is tremendously popular. People love it. It's 6 books long, and they almost always read to the end because it goes from just being about these ancient civilizations to then being about what is it they were guarding us from, what is it that they were trying to protect us from? Because clearly it was something. So I've really taken some liberties with that and had a great time with it. And of course, if a cataclysm came once and we think it's coming again in that series, the Deathless series, I do have that cataclysm come again. So it's not good for Earth. And
No,
that's kind of a fear, I think. Go ahead.
no, that's what I was going to say. When you're talking about these cataclysms, by the Aztecs say that we're on the fifth sun, as they would call it. It has died that many times. One by jaguar, by fire, by flood.
Uh-huh.
I think by earthquake as well as another one of those. So, yeah,
There's one by famine, but
there's
interestingly, the famine one of the things that doesn't get mentioned a lot is they talk about extreme cold. So there was no food because there was extreme cold, which is exactly what would happen in the nuclear winter caused by a major asteroidal impact. The Hopi up in North America, they have the fourth world. And here's what's really odd about that. So they were kind of doing the same thing. They just counted a little bit differently. Their fourth world is only a few years off from when the Indian Vedas say that the Kali Yuga started. Why are those so close together? They're all talking about the next world starting. It's all happening right at the same time. Why?
why I agree totally. Like, there's too many of these, you know, too many people are looking at like these small pieces, these small slivers. Okay, these Aztecs or these people said it. This is when it started. But when you start putting it all together and like stacking it up, you start to see similarities, and you cannot throw those out. It's like there's a reason that this happened, and it's great that you brought up about the like Halloween and why do all these cultures have kind of something similar, because I was always fascinated because of course I live in Mexico. Dia de Muertos, Day of the Dead, is on November 1st and 2nd, and I was like, why is
Uh-huh.
it so closely tied to Halloween, because Halloween's on the 31st? I'm like these cultures that didn't have interactions, and they have the very kind of similar celebration of sorts. Why is that? And here we go. It's the asteroids that are coming in. It bringing back the loved ones. That was the first and second, is that you have the ability for the loved ones to return back to Earth. Was that the
Exactly.
the
It's
asteroids
always
streaming through the
about
sky?
death and go. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Wow.
find it fascinating. And the same cultures also have other similarities. So Anubis and the Aztec god Xolotl are nearly identical in most ways. They are both servants of an Isis like goddess. They both have the Sirius dog star, is what they are associated with. Um, they are they have a lot of the same symbolism. And if you look at a Zolotl dog, just look at a modern day Zolotl dog from Mexico and look at this dog. It looks just like Anubis. Like if you just look at the dog, you're like,
Yeah,
they're on different
those are the
continents and
hairless
they're
the hairless
separated.
dogs of Mexico. Yes.
Yeah. So they're separated by thousands of years and thousands of miles, but they're telling us the same exact story. Why? And what really blew my mind is Sirius is associated in Egyptian mythology with both Isis and Anubis. And the Egyptians didn't make mistakes. They didn't do stuff like that. They might change an association or add one later. Why was this possible? Well, as it turned out, we learned recently that Sirius is a binary star in the last century. We didn't know that. How did the Egyptians know that? How did the Egyptians know that Sirius was a binary star? They had to have had incredibly powerful telescopes to do that, or they had to come from a culture who did. And what's funny is nobody believes them, but they say they did. They have a king's list that goes back 40,000 years. Just nobody wants to believe it because it sounds so preposterous.
Yeah. I really hate that when they have information that refutes kind of like the mainstream archaeology or mainstream history, and it's like we're just not going to accept that. We're just going to throw that out. And I've seen that so often with many other topics. When you're talking about werewolves, a lot of people, or dogman of sorts, a lot of people will say, well, they're not they don't have these magical abilities. They don't just manifest out of thin air. But there's so many people that are reporting that happening. And it's like, we can't throw that information out. It doesn't matter if all you saw was a flesh and blood creature. We still can't discount that other people have seen other things that are unexplainable. So we need to bring it all in. We can't just pick and choose the statistics and what we want to fit our ideology. We have to look at it all. If in the end I'm wrong because we pulled in all this information and it proves me wrong, then I'll accept that. I'll accept that. But it's the point that it's like, no, I'm only going to pick and choose because that's what suits the narrative, and we're just not going to listen to the rest of this because it's too messy. It'll mess up everything we've learned. And that's the problem, is we have to be able to unlearn before we can actually really start to learn and realize what has happened.
Well said. What I tried to do in the Deathless Saga, that No Such Thing as Werewolves book, was give people a plausible reason, a variable they were missing. So you look at the world as it stands today, and clearly werewolves can't exist using modern physics. There's just too much energy required to shift from a human into a werewolf. So there's something we don't know. Doesn't mean it's impossible, just means we don't understand how it would be possible with modern science. But if you went back 300 years and explained how modern jet propulsion worked, they'd look at you like you were crazy because we didn't have that technology back then. So in the book, I noted, this is a totally separate discipline that I study. I've always studied helioseismology, the sun, and how it changes over time. Back in 1989, there was a power outage in Canada that affected like 6 million people. And I remembered it. And it was from a solar flare, what's called a CME, a coronal mass ejection. So I was like, wow, that's crazy. And I started doing more investigation. Then I read Dr. Robert Schoch, who brought them up and told me more about them. And that's where I learned about the Carrington event, which happened in 18, I want to say 59, right before the Civil War. If it hit today, it would destroy the world, basically. It would wipe out all electricity. It would destroy every power grid across the planet, all modern technology. Every jet would fall in the air. None of your cars made before 20 or made after 2015 would work. It would be bad news if it hit us. It would fry literally every electronic, because one half of the component of a CME is a oh, what kind of burst do they call that?
Like an
Anyway, it's a burst
electromagnetic
that takes out
pulse.
all electronics. Yes, that's what I was reaching for, an electromagnetic pulse.
Yeah.
So that's what I used in my book. I had a CME hit Earth because it can happen at any time. There's no way for us to predict it. There's no way for us to stop it. We'll have about 48 hours notice, and then basically we're reset to the dark ages. It doesn't necessarily mean, we got hit by a comet. It could be some other catastrophe. So in that first series, that's what I used. I wanted people to realize if the sun can change, the type of energy it can put out can change. If plants can change and do things based on chlorophyll, why couldn't a werewolf change form based off moonlight, which is reflected off the moon from the sun? So if there is a change in the sun and that hits the moon, and the moon hits, something on Earth, maybe it could have that effect. And I took it and ran with it. I don't know for sure that any of that is legitimate. My goal as an author is to write things that my audience thinks are plausible, so that we keep an open mind. I don't, not too open. I don't want to believe everything, like you said, but like most things could be true. And until you give me irrefutable evidence, I'm going to keep my mind open.
I think that is the best way to approach things. Like I do believe we need a healthy dose of skepticism as well. You can't believe everything is what maybe we want it to be, but we have to be open to change and just open to just about anything. Until proven wrong, anything is possible. So, but you have to prove it. It is one thing, and if we just keep lining these things up, and people will throw out anecdotal evidence, which is ridiculous because that's how we did things in the past. Anecdotal evidence was everything was written down, documented, uh, geoglyphs, petroglyphs, and we left that information for ourselves. Have we been able to decipher it completely? Not yet. Maybe some of them we have, and that's another thing is when we get these petroglyphs or these hieroglyphs or these geoglyphs, we will accept part of the truth, but then throw the rest out. Oh, they didn't mean giants. Oh, they didn't mean portals. They didn't mean vortexes. They didn't mean that.
But how do
They
you know
meant
that? Like,
that's exactly it. It's like, okay, so the rest of the stuff that they've documented has all been certain and true, but when they talk about this thing, oh no, we're just going to throw that out. Why are we doing that? Why are we saying that this is non-existent, this is not true, or it's just an allegory or something along that line? It's like,
and
no.
I think it's because most people cannot accept it. They hold their identity a little too closely. They aren't open minded. Maybe they haven't been taught a lot of critical thinking. So it's a threat. Like, I know how everything works, and what you're telling me would force me to reassess everything. And they just can't handle
it, it's so true, because the reality that you're living has to die so that you can change and realize that it really does. It's like, no, my paradigm that I'm living in, my life that I'm living in, the reality that I see, my 9 to 5, it will change because this isn't what I've been told. This isn't what I believe. And people just don't want to let go of that. They don't want to let go of their Netflix and their 9 to 5. It just, no, the sun rises and the sun sets, and I go to work and I come home and that's it. And I'm going to watch some Netflix and go to bed. But there's so much more to it. And and other people will be like, well, what will it change? It won't change anything of the way I live. No, it changes everything, actually, because then you start to see things differently. You start to realize that, yeah, we're lied to, and there's so much more information that we're just not being given. And why are there gatekeepers gatekeeping this information?
and I think there's a lot of reasons for that. And I've got a lot of theories, most of which I explore in my book. So if you're familiar
I
with
would
the
love to hear
WEF,
your. Yeah, oh,
the
yeah, yeah,
Worldwide
yeah.
Economic Forum, that ring any bells for you? So I have the Forum for Worldwide Economics. It's basically the WEF, and I call them out for the shills that they are. What they did at Göbekli Tepe is criminal. We're all aware of it by now, I'm sure. But if you're not, They planted olive trees in a country where it's illegal to cut down olive trees over an archaeological ruin. And tree roots are notorious for destroying everything underneath them. We've only excavated 2% of the site, and they won't do any more of it. And what's really, really kind of frightening is we know for a fact that Göbekli Tepe was used for about 2,000 years, and then for some reason it was buried. Why was it buried? Who hid it? And then you start asking some questions of are we dealing with the same people today? Are they still around and still using maybe a slightly different religion, their religion, to keep the secrets of the past, things that they know? There's just too much that I've seen that's really made me question. And I was Captain Skeptic for a long time. I didn't believe anything that I couldn't see with my own eyes. But I remember I had a friend in my early 20s, and we were walking down the street, and he would get angry. And when he got angry, as we walked down, the lights over his head would pop and go out. So we're talking street lights as we walk down the street. Now, you see that happen once, that's a coincidence. You see that happen twice, wow, that's still really odd. You see that happen 4 times in the course of one block, okay, something's going on there. And Nikola Tesla filed a patent for wireless power transmission that he based on his study of the Egyptian pyramids. And for those that don't know, if you have a magnet, its electromagnetic field is concentrated at the tip. So if you build a pyramid that is a magnet, it's going to push all that energy to the tip where it can be accessed or distributed. So I'm not saying that they were definitely power plants, but we have a lot of evidence that maybe there were. And I'm an Egyptologist. If it exists about Egyptology, I've read it. There's no book I haven't read from the past 100 years, and nobody has any proof that they were tombs. They were monuments, but there was never like a sarcophagus placed in any of those tombs. Those were all, in the Valley of the Dead. Like
Yeah,
that's not
there's a
something they did.
Valley of the Kings for a
Mm-hmm.
reason. I actually
Mm-hmm.
believe, wasn't there one pyramid where they did find a tomb inside of a pyramid, but I think it was like placed in there after. I know you said you're really into Egyptology, so
I,
I don't want to be
I'm
saying
I'm unaware of them finding a tomb. They found a
okay.
sarcophagus that was empty,
Yes, that's what I mean. Yes,
but they
sorry, that is what I
but they
mean. But
don't
it's
know
not.
for sure it's a The trouble is it's not the right size to be a sarcophagus.
Oh, look
So
at that.
sure, it's roughly the right shape and roughly the right size, but if they're too big, so why are they different? If you go to the sarcophagi that were created in the Valley of the Kings and you look at them, they're all pretty uniform because people are about the same size. These are for, well, either for bigger people, like 8 feet tall people, or they were something else entirely. I mean, some people have suggested, based on the dimensions of the Ark of the Covenant given in the Bible, that possibly it was designed to hold something like that. And again, I'm not saying it was, but we can't discount that, especially when you look at the scans that just came out under the Pyramid of Khafre. It looks like there's an entire city under the Giza Plateau, like massive city. And maybe the technology is bunk, but everywhere they've used it, like on the pyramids themselves, has been accurate. So if we can use it accurately in some locations, then we try it in another location. It says, hey, there's a bunch of stuff under here that completely matches the legends of people like Herodotus, who said there is definitely a bunch of underground stuff and we could see the priests going into it. You know, it's like you said, or rather dismiss all anecdotal data. And that's the problem with Herodotus. He's considered to be anecdotal data recorded, not like a true historian. So they ignore everything he had to say.
It's so disheartening. We get on the edge of these new discoveries, such as the scans underneath the pyramid, and then they will do everything and anything to discredit it and to throw it out. It's like we need to attack it at every angle and pervert it, and then people will forget about it, and
Mm-hmm.
because they
So
will be like, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
book 1 in my series is about Atlantis itself and kind of where that was, and something I call the Fortress of Atlas. Book 2, which will be out exactly, they're coming out every 30 days. Book 2 is beneath Khafre's pyramid. It is obviously about the scans that they found. So it's what I think is really down there and what they were building. And what I posit, and this is wild and will piss off a lot of people probably if you're in mainstream academia, is it possible that there was something like the pyramids that were built many, 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 many thousands of years ago, and that the ancient Egyptians rebuilt those structures for some reason? So they understood, hey, there's a purpose. These things are doing something. Maybe they're power plants. And so they said, okay, we're going to bend our entire civilization to restoring these great things. And maybe not. But there are tons of artifacts that were passed down through the various dynasties of the Egyptians that predate them. So there are vases that they couldn't cut. So if you look at the vases they actually created during their time period, they look nothing like these. And they're made of diorite, which was one of the hardest minerals we have. It really looks like it was bored with a drill or a laser. And it's within a micron or two of being completely round. So it's way beyond tolerances that a normal person could hit. And the answer I hear from academia is oh, you're just a Luddite and you believe ancient people couldn't do that. Oh, it's like, well, could you do that today? We'll give you the diorite. We'll give you whatever you ask for. Go ahead. You can have as many copper chisels as you want. Let's see what you can bust out.
It's so true, and I, from what I've heard, I don't think even our lasers are able to make that diorite vases that they have right now. Like we can get very, very, very close, but we can't get it as perfect as they had it. It's ridiculous. And yeah, I was just actually reading about that or listening about that the other day. And because the Egyptians did try to copy, but they used a much more softer material. I don't know, was it like a limestone material or something like that? They
Yeah,
used
it
something that
was
was much
soft
more.
limestone for soft limestone for most of their vases, but they did use clay and other stuff as well, but nothing like diorite. And it's funny because if you ask them where they got the vases, they'll tell you these are ancient heirlooms from our earliest ancestors that have been passed down for 40,000 years. So it's not like there's not an answer. We just refuse because as soon as academia sees this is mythology, this is religion, to them that's not fact. Whereas really what mythology and religion are is history, encoded through the eyes of the people who wrote down what they understand. I'm actually reading the Old Testament as we speak, or rereading it rather, for like book 4 or 5 in the series. There was some relevant stuff I needed to look up. And I'm telling you, man, this book, the Old Testament, it's a camp management manual and it is a history book. That is exactly what it is.
that
And
that is
that's
what
true
I've
of
been
every holy book
saying.
I've read.
Yeah, I've been saying that. I'm like, people, like, when you mention the Bible, people are like, oh no, I don't want anything to do with this. I said, start treating it like a history book. It is one of the greatest history books in the world. And you will start to learn so much more, instead of getting turned off. Oh, it's the Bible. I don't want to read this. No, 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 no. Take your time and slowly start to go through it, which I need to practice what I preach, because I need to go through the Old Testament. I read it so many years ago. But at that point, I was reading it because I thought that's the right thing to do. Now I want to read it because I want to know, I want to learn. So, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I
And it
want to
hits
read it for those
way
purposes.
different. It's way different when
Exactly.
you're reading it from the view of somebody who thinks about things from a higher technology standpoint. So, what if Yahweh was from an enlightened earlier culture of people who were considered to be gods? And remember, Yahweh comes from the Canaanite pantheon. So Yahweh was definitely not the only person. There was a bunch of gods in that pantheon. And he says in the Bible a whole bunch of times, don't worship them. It's not like he's pretending I'm the only God. He's like, there are a whole bunch of gods, but you're going to worship me because I'm a jealous God. He literally says that. So we know that polytheism was a thing, and I believe that each one of those gods was a powerful person who could do things that we couldn't understand for most of human history. Like he gives Adam a lifespan of approximately 1,000 years, and each of Adam's descendants lives for less time. What does that sound like to you? That's genetic manipulation. So it sounds like he was practicing cloning, made his own tribe, and that's where the tribes of Israel came from. So they're not their first people, they're Yahweh's people. And if you look at Zoroastrianism, that's a different people, and that's Asura Mazda. But when you get to the root of it, all of them are either an Asura or a Deva, if you look at the Vedas. So Zoroastrianism, which is in Iraq, has Asura Mazda. That same god, Mazda, is mentioned in the Vedas in India. So they know about him too. But in India, the Deva were the good guys and the Asura were the bad guys. And in Iraq, the Asura are the good guys and the Deva are the bad guys. But it's the same religion. And in 2017, I want to say, a genetic study came out and it started showing where people had migrated across the globe. It was fascinating. I think most people saw it at the time. Definitely worth a watch if you haven't. But you can see over the span of like 60 to 100,000 years where humanity went across the globe just by measuring the genetic markers of every native population. And we can see it started somewhere around Kazakhstan and fanned out from there. And it fanned out into India, it fanned out into China, it fanned out into what is now the Middle East, it fanned out into Europe. And this is why so many gods are similar. And you can look at Norse gods, and they're almost identical to Greek gods, to Armenian gods, to Egyptian gods. Like, there's an analog in almost every culture to the Indian gods and the Vedas. I don't think those similarities are accidental. I think they're recalling the heroes from a previous age that actually exist.
Wow. That is a lot to unpack there for sure. I love it, and when you're talking about like these heroes or these gods from another age, it's so evident that I believe that a lot of these gods were from another age that had an ability that that everybody deemed them to be godly, and when you're talking about like cataclysms, like these people were survivors from the previous generations who were at the prime, they're at this much higher level. Then there's these cataclysms that reset. And if people don't believe in these cataclysms, go back. Like the only way our technology will decline is if something, you know, catastrophic has occurred, such as a cataclysm, and you look at like the rock work in Peru, you can see the changes, that there's a degradation in the technology of how they built these walls. It's clear as day that as the years go on, it gets worse and worse. That should not happen, not with technology, unless it's lost, unless something happened, you lost the ability, and then you're trying to replicate. And that's what's happening, is replication.
Are you familiar with Baalbek, Lebanon?
Yes, I am actually. Those are those big, huge bricks, correct? Or no, I don't want to say bricks. That's such an understatement. But those big, huge,
It kind of says it, yeah.
rectangular stones. Yeah.
Exactly, but there's a lot there people don't know. So what you're talking about are the three stones under the Temple of Poseidon, and each one of those weighs about 900 tons. A Roman crane could only lift 90 tons, and we're told the Egyptians didn't have cranes. The records that the Romans left said that they found the ruins and built on top of it, so we have that information. Not everybody believes that. They call into to question the accounts of that. But there are two stones at the site that really kind of blow big holes in their theory. And the biggest one of them is called the Forgotten Stone. The Forgotten Stone is 1,950 tons. So it weighs like almost as much as the Statue of Liberty. It's more than any but a handful of cranes in the world can lift today. Today, right now in 2025, we have a few cranes in the world that can lift this, only a few. Most countries do not own a crane that can move this stone. And it's at the bottom of a quarry. So they're going to have to pull it uphill to get it out there. I don't care how many people you attach to that thing with ropes. Physics will stop you from moving it. It'll literally dig a trench. If you try pulling a rock like that, it's going to go into the ground. There was a stone that was transported in, I want to say, the 1700s called the Thunderstone. It was brought to Russia from Sweden. And that stone was like, I don't know, 900 tons. They had to use trains and barges and like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of horses. And they had to wait for the ground to be frozen, because if the ground wasn't frozen, they couldn't do it. It would just dig like a plow and make a furrow and just kind of gradually go into the ground. That's what you would do. So who was going to move this like 2,000 ton stone? What were they going to use it for, and why was it carved perfectly and then left there? I mean, I know exactly what it looks like to me. This civilization was caught with their pants down while they were in the middle of building something. They got hit with a cataclysm, and the rock is all that's left.
Yeah, I agree totally. There's so many unfinished um projects, we'll say. There's so many
Mm-hmm.
rocks that are sitting there that are quarried, that are just left untouched. It's like, who does that unless you are gone? As a single individual person like myself, if I am building something and I leave it unfinished, it's because I died. It's because something happened to me, catastrophically happened to me, that I could not finish this project. I'm not I'm not working on a shelf or a bench, and I just like, I'm just not going to ever do that again. No, there's a reason why, and a huge reason why, especially on this size, this magnitude. It just, There has to be a reason, and there are so many of these that this has happened, and it's like, why? And so you were saying that these I want to rewind this to that people are like, when they covered up Gobekli Tepe, when they covered that up, and now they're putting olive trees on there. Do you have any idea as to why this is being it's a suppression? And I agree with you. It's like, is it the same people who backfilled it, covered it all, that are now, in a different way kind of covering it all, preventing people excavating it, and that's what's happening?
Yeah,
What is the reason for that? Why do you think they are preventing this access?
what I really believe is that they're trying to keep people asleep in some way. I don't know why. I happen to live in Sonoma County, and we live near Guerneville, and there's a place out there. What is it called? You would recognize it in me. The Bohemian Grove.
Oh,
We've had
yes.
Ellen
Yeah.
Greenspan, George Bush, Ronald Reagan, like famous person after famous person after famous person come here. And what they do there is they worship an owl statue. Why are they doing that? Why do you have all the elite and powerful people come to the same place? On the other opposite coast in Atlanta, or in Georgia at least, there was the what do they call those stones that got blown up?
Oh, yeah, yeah. The
Somebody in the
guide
audience will
stones.
probably
The guide
supply it
the,
in the comments. The guide stones.
the guide stones.
They say straight up what these people are trying to accomplish, which is they want no more than 500 million people on the planet. They want to control everything. And I genuinely believe we have had a long standing struggle between the forces of light and the forces of darkness going back to the beginning of time. And that when you say God, what you're talking about is a vibrational frequency of humanity. So if all of us are in tune with being chill and practicing good things, we as a whole are generating a God energy. If we are all hedonists and murderers and terrible people, we are generating a very different kind of entity. And it looks like there were two warring religions back then. Moloch and Baal are both part of the Canaanite religion, and Moloch is mentioned in the Bible. And God expressly forbids you to sacrifice kids to him because that's what Moloch wanted. He wanted you to sacrifice your progeny to him. We look today, and I don't necessarily care where you come down on the issue of abortion. I'm not trying to make this political at all, but there are more abortions going on today than at any other point in history. Kids are being murdered all over the world. It looks like this hedonistic religion is always operating behind the scenes and trying to seize control, and that is backed by very powerful, very wealthy elites. Do I think that there's an actual Satan with horns? Maybe not. I mean, who can really know? But even if there's not, there's definitely existential forces that align with that seem to be always pushing in the same direction. And there's very interesting brain scans where people have raised a lot of questions about the pineal gland and what it would be like if it wasn't atrophied. So our pineal glands are atrophied. What would things be like 10,000, 20,000 years ago before that occurred, when everybody's third eye, that's what your pineal gland is, was open? How would things be different? So you heard me mention earlier, my friend, lights were blowing up over his head. What if we have some sort of frequency or ability to broadcast, EMF or ELF or something, and that's sort of how we change the world around us, what we would call magic. We know that exists to a certain extent because if you go to a city like Los Angeles, you can feel the way the energy is changing you when you're there. When I lived there, everybody was angry, and that made me angry. And then when I moved to the country and I'm in the stillness and serenity of the trees, you're like, this feels very different. Like everybody, regardless of belief, can feel that difference. And I'd ask you to follow that back to its source. Like, why is there that difference? Why do we crave nature? Why do we crave peace? Why do we crave meditation? And why is there such a heavy cost for engaging in hedonism and sin long term? So I'm not a Christian, I'm a Zen Buddhist, but the concept of sin really resonates with me, and it stains the human spirit. And we are mind, body, and spirit. I think those three are all very important. Yet in the last century, we've done away with spirit. It's just mind and body. And I don't think a lot of people have stopped to ask, well, what happens when you take that spirit away?
I love it, and I agree totally. It's this separation of spirituality. We've kind of like isolated, especially with like I was born and raised Catholic, and in my Catholic, the way I was raised, the spirit side of it, the spiritual side of it, was totally removed. Here in Mexico, I will say it's completely different. It's held more together in that way. There's magic is believed. Like that's one thing that I have seen. But when you go into like North America, like I know Mexico is part of North America. But when you go into like the U.S. and Canada, it kind of like it's alienated. It's like no, we need to push that all away, and it's fascinating. Like all that you're saying here is, I find it so intriguing, and it's hitting home with me when I'm listening to everything that you're saying. I'm like I'm making notes, and then I'm like, oh crap, I forget what I was talking about. I forget this one, but I I could listen to you. I could listen to you talk for hours and hours here. Now I do want to bring in one part. Like I feel like I should be concentrating a little more on some things, but these gods or these beings that we saw as deities, is there a like some there is there other, maybe there were extraterrestrials? What is your thoughts on extraterrestrials involvement within our past, our culture? um
The short answer is I don't know because there's not
okay.
enough evidence to support it. There's a lot that suggests that it could be true. Like the Seven Sisters pop up over and over. That's the Pleiades constellation for those that don't know. Lots of people are pointing at the night sky and at specific stars. And there could be a lot of reasons for that, but some of the reasons appear to be that we were visited by people that came from there. Like the Hopi have legends about that basically aliens came down from the Seven Sisters and they called them gods, but they came down from the stars. Well, if you're coming down from the stars, in modern parlance, that makes you an alien. And there are lots of cultures across the world that have believed that that happened. I think it's very possible, but I also don't know if that's correct. A lot of other people believe that there are multiple dimensions and or something that we can't perceive, like we can perceive the first three dimensions, but perhaps we can't perceive the fourth dimension, and there's energy beings that live there and they interact with us in some way. So I don't know. If you believe the Anunnaki mythology, it certainly sounds like aliens colonized Earth. They needed a race to work as laborers, so they modified our genetics right around 300, 400,000 years ago, right when we actually came into existence. So something created us right around then, so it could be them. And if you look all over Africa, there appears to be proof of what they say in their holy writings. And one of the most telling points, Enki is one of their big gods, and Enlil is another one. Both of those words appear in South Africa in different places. And there's something called Adam's calendar that's over 100,000 years old. And if you look at it from the air, it looks like circuitry. It's made out of stone, but it looks like circuitry running through the land, like just straight up circuitry. Like if you ever seen a circuit board, that is exactly what it looks like. So almost like Nazca lines, but much
I
larger and more complex.
I was just about to say, is it anything similar to the Nazca lines? But you're saying it's much
Very much
larger, more.
so.
Okay.
But the Nazca lines aren't rock. They're generally carved in the earth. This is actually
Correct.
rock. So somebody built a massive structure out of rock. Why? What possible reason could you have to do that 100,000 years ago? Well, according to the Anunnaki mythology, they were running out of gold at their northern mines, which, by the way, corresponds with Mauritania, which is where I think Atlantis is. That's where the Eye of the Sahara is. So that would have been their first stop. So they would have been the parents of the original Atlantean culture. And then they moved to South Africa and they set up a second culture there, which appears to be echoed by a lot of the native tribes in the lore that they remember. So there are questions. It doesn't mean that they were necessarily aliens, but somebody from a previous civilization or possibly an alien race definitely appears to have modified human culture at multiple touch points. If you look at Peru, there's Viracocha. So they have somebody who came from what we think appears to be India, and he didn't match their physical appearance at all. He had lighter skin and I want to say red hair. And he also brought books. And what's really troubling is the Peruvians don't use books. So how did they know what a book was? And why would they ascribe that to a god bringing knowledge?
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Like it's just crazy having like I just want to know more. I want to know more. Like, where were these people really coming from? Like, who was this person? Who was that person? What was the truth behind them? Was it deceit, or was it actually someone, was it actual God, or was it someone being deceitful pretending to be a god, or was it just someone being worshipped as a god because he had all this knowledge, which I think
I
is more
think
common. And yeah.
I think Thoth probably has the closest like main line to what the actual truth is. And it's funny because if you're familiar with Star Wars, the concept of the Force comes from the Emerald Tablets.
Wow. Okay.
So if you
I'd
read
never
the
heard
Emerald
that. So
Tablets,
and I love Star Wars. So this is I'm excited to hear this.
well, I didn't realize it until I read the Emerald Tablets, and you're like, wait, a living energy field between all living forms? Wait a second, this sounded pretty familiar to me. Thoth talks about that on the tablets. He also talks about he finds the Halls of Amenti. I'm not sure if I'm familiar with the Halls of Amenti, but that's the second book in my series. Um, the Halls of Amenti, he says, are where 32 sages from the previous civilization before his are immortalized. So they built 32 thrones, and their bodies are in these thrones, but their consciousnesses are reborn as people on the world and attempt to guide us in the direction of light and make our life better. So if you think of like many of our great sages throughout history, it's probably these 32 people. That's what Thoth claims. And I got the impression he doesn't spell it out per se, but it sounds like he was being interviewed to be number 33. So
I
that
was
made me
just
start
going to
asking,
ask.
well, yeah. If there are 32 people that were passing this information down from whatever the last interglacial culture were, and to us they would appear to be gods, but really they're just ascended, so they have learned a vibrational mastery where they can like basically project their consciousness out into the universe. And that sounds crazy to us because we can't do anything like that, but maybe they could. Well, if they could do that, there's probably people who could do that who don't have our best interest in mind, what we would call demons, also doing that. And you hear everything you've heard throughout all of history about how possession works. You're like, sounds a heck of a lot what's being described on those emerald tablets, but the bad side of it. And that's really our earliest religion. Like people will say Zoroastrianism is the earliest religion because it's the last one still surviving. But if you actually look at the oldest record of a religion, that is Thoth. And it predates Egypt. They admit that he's one of their earliest gods. And he's saying it came from somebody before him. And the timeline matches up perfectly with the last interglacial 150,000 years ago. So I don't know. Are they gods? Are they aliens? Somebody was here. And it really appears like they showed up about 400,000 years ago, hung out for a while. The Ice Age came, they left. Our society muddled around. Then, about 150,000 years ago in India, at very least, and probably also in Atlantis and the ancestors of the Greeks, new empires formed as things got warmer, and they weren't as great as the ones that came before them, but they still had a lot of technology. They crashed. And then here we are 40,000 years ago, which is actually in the middle of an ice age. That's when Thoth is given this information. That's when he finds the Halls of Amenti. And again, this is in his words or just what the tablet says. Like, this is the shit I saw. These are the things that happened to me. And they're on the walls of the Temple of Edfu. So somebody believed it enough to make an entire temple in Egypt and put those tablets up.
Wow. And and I find that quite interesting that Thoth was possibly going to be the 33rd, because that 33rd, the 33 number, is quite a powerful number. It comes out so many times and so many things. And that's what, when you said there was 32 ascended
You're like,
masters,
that
so to
number's
say.
off because there's, 32 is not
Yeah,
a magic number, but
yeah, and then
33 is.
yeah, when you said Thoth, and I'm like, when you're talking about it, I was like, was he going to be the 33rd? And I wonder if this pineal gland, helped us to create, help us to ascend. And what if Jesus coming back to, forgive us of all our sins, was actually to somehow reinstate our pineal gland? Maybe when we die, there's a something that happens that our pineal gland opens up, and then we can ascend at that time. It's kind of like, okay, we're going to open the door just at that specific moment. uh I don't know, just a thought, just a
Or
thought.
possibly if you die with it atrophied, you don't ascend. And so eternal life is wake up your third eye and then you will ascend. So I don't know if
Mm.
that's true, but I'm a Zen Buddhist. So I follow the teachings of Buddha, Gautama, 500 years before Christ, and he has some very similar stuff to say. What we're taught in the Eightfold Path, it's all about promoting harmony so that you can ascend. And when I think about what it's causing you to do, I have to wonder if those practices are actually awakening your pineal gland. I mean, I sat and meditated, I still do every day. What's the purpose of that? I am becoming one with reality. And it feels like to me when I do that, or when I do long hikes, backpacking trips in the wild, the wilderness, and I'm completely away from people, I am closer to God. I am closer to ascension. I am closer to something greater than all of us. I feel that. And I think a lot of people do. Too many for it to just be like anecdotal experience.
It, I agree totally. I had a very interesting encounter, and I won't go too much into that, but it was kind of like, yeah, I feel closer to God being out in nature than any constructed building that we've built for Him. And it's kind of like, no, I feel more at one when I'm out there. And I was going to say though, also like perhaps if our pineal gland is calcified and is shut down, that we get stuck into a maybe possibly a reincarnation trap where we just keep reincarnating,
Mm-hmm.
keep coming back, and it's because we haven't cleared this yet. We haven't opened it up enough yet. We haven't broken through.
Which by the way fits the whole force thing very nicely. You think about Star Wars and the Force and all of us ascending to join the Force. You're trapped and unable to do that maybe for many lifetimes, which is exactly what Tibetan Buddhism and the Indians believe. That is exactly what they believe. I practice Zen Buddhism, which doesn't say it's wrong, just says I don't know for sure it's true, so we don't believe it outright. We don't have any beliefs, we just have practices. Um, but I find it fascinating that motif shows up over and over and over and over. And that's the tact I took in my book. In my book, I have the concept of a device that goes on your hand, and I call it an astrolathe, which for reasons that'll be clear in the book why it exists. But the long and short of it is it's designed to awaken your pineal gland. So what my character Mitch does that is magic is all harnessing his pineal gland and using that to broadcast energy in a way that people were always capable of doing, but would now be considered magic. And it's this that all the ancient hero gods of the past would have been using. So we've completely lost those abilities. We don't remember them. And when you ask me what is it I think the elites are trying to do, I think they're trying to keep us from that. I don't know why, but I think they are.
Yeah, I think that we have been governed as a species. We've been governed, and I don't mean like, oh, government. No, like how we have governors on cars, so we reduce their speed. We restrict and we constrict what they are able to do. I believe that our abilities have been governed because we are more powerful than we'll ever know in this lifetime, and I feel that we need to, yeah, there is something or someone that is trying to control us to make sure that we don't remember or we don't connect or we don't, unify and realize how powerful we are as a species, as a person, as a being. And I think this elimination of spirit from the trifecta, or from the Trinity, it is part of that process as well. It's kind of like we're just going to pick these people apart piece by piece, and also they also have that I was going to say was also like this causing this internal, not internal, but this divisiveness that's happening between us all and reducing the connection between us. Because I think when we connect, when we actually truly connect to people, that we can actually elevate us. And maybe that's part of the process of decalcifying or like opening up our pineal gland is this connection. And all you see in the news now these days or everywhere in the world is this internal fighting. And we have the left and we have the right, and then within the left and right we have these other internal battles. It's
Mm-hmm.
always people pitted against people, when it's just like we need to come together. We need to come together and start moving forward, because
Agreed.
your neighbor's not your enemy.
Yeah, and that division is not helping anybody. United we stand, divided we fall. And I think that's true of every civilization in the past. And, it's worrisome. You look at kids don't have that. So a lot of people think that the reason why the pineal gland is less calcified in kids is because they're young. And maybe that's true. But I believe it's because they don't have the stresses and divisions and the conflict forced on them that you're describing. So when I grew up as a kid in the 70s and the 80s, like I just went outside and played. We didn't know anything at all about politics. Today, my 10-year-old niece knew everything that was going on in politics. She's older than 10 now, but at 10, she knew everything that was going on. That's a weight you shouldn't put on a child. And if I'm right, that's part of what's calcifying your pineal gland. They're driving away childhood and driving away hope. and freedom of expression in so many different ways. I mean, you could see it like just looking at a parking lot. If you look at a parking lot today, and you compare it to a parking lot in the 1980s, the 1960s, in the 1980s, there's pictures. You can go do it on Google. Whoever's listening to this right now, just pause it, go look, search for parking lots from those eras. Look at them. Today, white, gray, black. Back then, red, pink, purple, green, blue, polka dots, literal polka dots. I mean, all sorts of crazy stuff. That's gone.
This expression, yeah, we just stuck in these. It's like we reversed like the movie Pleasantville, where they slowly grow into color and then they expand their horizons. But we're in the reverse of that. It's kind of like controlling. They're getting us into the black and white and into controlling us. Though we'll see color on our TVs, we're reverting to like this very regimented, strict world that we're living in right now. Yeah, there was less rules, and people just there was less rules, but people got along better. There was
They also seem happier. You talk about living in
yes,
Mexico. One of the things that I love about visiting Mexico, these people generally have way less money than anybody in the United States. We would consider them to be living in poverty. They're much happier than most of us. Much happier than most of us.
yeah, I agree totally. It's like on Sunday, everybody gets dressed up, they go out, they have good times, and they're spending time with their family and families, and it's just this collective raising of like just this goodwill. And I agree with you. Yeah, there's a lot of people who they just don't have a lot of money. They'll go to the pizza place, they'll go to Little Caesars, buy the cheapest pizza, go to the
Uh-huh.
boardwalk on the ocean, and just like have a little picnic with their family, and they just enjoy life much more than most of us. They're enjoying, they're in the moment. And it's beautiful. I will say that's one thing I have noticed is how they live and how they celebrate and how they have a good time, and it's not these restrictions and these rules and these laws that just keep holding us down and tying us down. And don't get me wrong, I understand that. Yeah, we do need a little bit of clarity and control in some things, but for most part, it's just it's too controlled. And and
Yeah,
and
and I
and when
also
that
feel they're
happens,
an
yeah,
example of somebody whose spirit has not been broken. Whereas for the rest of it, it clearly has.
yeah, I agree totally. It's our spirits have been broken, and we just need to live in the moment. We need to be happy and gracious for what we have, so that we can grow and we don't live in fear. Because yeah, when we live in fear, there is no growth, and that's like I've just been saying, we've just been bombarded with fear constantly. These potential wars, these bombings, these shootings, these everything.
COVID.
That's Yes, yes, that was a big one. It, it, just so much. There's so much fear constantly on the TV, 24/7, no matter what. Like we still have that, but they cranked that up to 11, and it caused so it caused so much problems. It caused so much problems that we're going to be generations going to try to still rectify those problems, because our children, well, some of the people's children are still fighting, are still being impacted by that. They're still terrified, and living in fear. There's no room for growth.
Mhm. I will say this: I've got a 5-year-old son. I also see the counter movement now, and it fills me with hope because so many people are returning to spirituality. Many of them are finding religion if they didn't have it. When I don't care what the religion is, they're finding something. And they seem happier. They're doubling down on the things that make humanity happy, and they're finding the things that kind of just make life better. I'm doing that for my son and trying to give him all the tools for things to swing back. It seems like this has been a very cyclic fight throughout all of human history, and maybe it'll never be over. And I feel like we're hitting the downside, and now this pendulum's about to swing and start going the other direction. So fingers crossed.
I I agree with that as well. This pendulum swing, I think, is coming around. It's not going fast enough for me, but it's coming. I can see it as well. And I'm giving, like you said, you're giving your son tools. We're giving our daughter the tools so that she knows right from wrong. She knows how to be free, and I think that's so important. Chris, I think we're kind of wrapping it up here for today, but I really thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I'd love to have you back on in the future if you're up for it.
Sure, I'd love to. I mean, as you can tell, I love talking about this stuff.
Does I love listening. I do like talking a little bit, but I love listening to, you know, the true history that is being hidden from us, and it's very, very
Mhm.
important that we sit there and we actually start to take it in and look at it for what it is. And I think that you've really done that very well. You've done your research, you've investigated it, and then you put it into a format that is fun to read, because you do hit some of these history books, and they're snoozers. It's just like, oh, okay, I'm falling asleep trying to read this. But what you've done is you've taken this information and you've made it interesting. You've made it accessible for so many other people. And so I applaud that.
Yeah, I learned early on, if you want to teach people or persuade people, you got to do it with a story. And I get emails every day from people. I've got like 60 books in print, but this series I'm about to release, Heir to Atlantis, I think is going to take the cake. I think because this is the one that is everything we just discussed encapsulated. And Mitch is my protagonist is coming on the truth and realizing all the things we talked about here, and then taking steps to change it. And ideally, millions of people read this book and they change a little bit about themselves and start thinking, well, maybe I should be a little bit more like Mitch.
Freaking awesome. I love it. I love it. So Chris, what before we head out, tell everybody where we can pick up your books, and when your next book is dropping as well, so they know. This show might come out I would say it's going to come out about mid-August. So is that about when your book is dropping?
The first one will be out in mid-August, so Heir to Atlantis will be available in paperback and ebook at that point. The audiobook will probably come out in September or October. All my stuff is audio. If you are reading the series, book 2 will be out September 1st, book 3 is going to be out October 1st, and so on and so forth for the next 4 or 5 books. I've already got a few written. And if that's not enough to whet your palate, I do have the Deathless Saga, which is 6 books long and very similar, where I kind of worked in more things like werewolves and zombies to see what I could do with that. But it's the same basic history and the idea that that's been hidden from us and that a long vanished culture is returning. So if any of that stuff is your jam, please pick it up. I'd love the support.
I'm positive there's many people that are listening or watching that this is their jam. These episodes, when we talk about, forgotten or lost past or history, always do well. And I'm as interested as just about everybody else. So Chris, again, I want to say thank you so much for spending the time with us.
Hey, thanks a lot. And I guess I'll see you next time.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Talk to you later. All right, everyone. That was just another journey through these veiled corridors that of forgotten history and speculative truth. And Chris definitely is reminding us that sometimes fiction isn't just storytelling, it's revelation cloaked in imagination. But like he said, the storytelling is so important. Storytellers are how they used to pass down these information, how they pass down our history was through storytellers. And that's what Chris is now. He's your modern day storyteller who would sit around and pass down our actual history. So again, like I said, if you're interested in today's episode, or it's something you felt whisper to you, of these ancient memories, or if you're getting pulled to these hidden truths, don't let it end here. Go check out Chris's website. He's got a ton of books and he's going to be releasing a bunch more. And I am extremely interested in them. I'm going to buy some. I love it. So until next time, everyone, this is Rye the Codega signing off. So until, keep your curiosity wandering, keep your light lit, and always find your way home.
Beneath the stars where shadows grow, the Nephilim's echoes whisper low. Bigfoot roams through the forest deep, and Dogman prowls where the brave won't sleep. Across lost history we wander wide, seeking the truth that time tried to hide. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit, through the darkness don't ever quit. In the Codex The mysteries come and always find your way back home. UFOs streak through the velvet skies. Aliens watch with unblinking eyes. The paranormal hums where silence breaks. In the void of secrets, a lantern wakes. Through hidden realms and stories untold, the Codex flame is a light to hold. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit. Through the darkness, don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come and always find your way back home. UFOs streak through the velvet skies. Aliens watch with unblinking eyes. The paranormal hums where silence breaks. In the void of secrets, a lantern wakes. Through hidden realms and stories untold, the Codex flame is a light to hold. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit. Through the darkness, don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come and always find your way back home. Legends rise from the Earth's deep core, a lost legacy we can't ignore. With every step, the veil grows thin, revealing worlds where the strange begins. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit. Through the darkness, don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come and always find your way back home. Giants, cryptids that call,